Why did the room fall silent the moment his fist landed? The sound wasn't loud, not compared to the daily noise of the dining hall, but it cut through everything. Trays stopped clattering. Voices died mid-sentence. Even the hum of ventilation seemed to hesitate. She felt the impact bloom across her cheekbone, warm and dull, a pressure that radiated inward before fatting into something colder. Not pain, not yet, more like information arriving late. She didn't fall. That seemed to confuse him more than anything else. Anna remained standing, knees flexed just enough to absorb the force. Her head turned with the strike, then returned to neutral. Her hand rose, not defensively but thoughtfully, fingers brushing the skin as if confirming a reading. Her breathing stayed even. No flare of anger, no shock, no tears, only assessment. Across from her, the recruit was breathing hard, chest heaving beneath his uniform like he'd won something. He had expected noise, resistance, fear. He got stillness instead, and stillness in places like this made people uncomfortable. Anna glanced once, only once, toward the security camera mounted high in the corner, then at the faces surrounding them. Wide eyes, tight jaws, no one moving, no one helping. She saw it all and stored it away without judgment. "Stay where you are," she said calmly. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't threaten. It simply existed, steady and final. That was when the instructors finally surged forward, authority snapping back into place. Hands on shoulders, sharp commands. The recruit was dragged away, confusion replacing his bravado as quickly as it had arrived. Someone asked if she was okay. "I am functional," she replied. And then she left. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and resignation. The corpsman tried to soften his voice when he asked what happened, but Anna answered the way she always did, with facts, stripped clean of emotion. Time, location, mechanism of injury, witnesses. The bruise darkened beneath the light as he documented it, fingers careful, professional. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "It is tolerable," she said, which was true. What she didn't say, what she never said, was that the worst part hadn't been the punch. It had been the silence after. The way no one intervened until rank forced their hand. The way restraint was mistaken for weakness. Again. That night alone in her room, she dismantled her sidearm with practiced ease, cleaned it, reassembled it, each movement precise, repetitive, grounding. The bruise throbbed faintly, but she ignored it. Pain was temporary, records were permanent. She trusted systems. Systems had rules. Rules created order. People were unpredictable. Systems were not. By morning, the recruit was still there. Smiling. That was when she felt it. Not anger, something quieter, a shift, a tightening behind the ribs, not fear, but anticipation. The kind that came when variables failed to resolve as expected. And she waited. Because she always did. What happens when truth moves slower than rumor? By midday, the story had already changed. In whispers, in smirks, in glances that lingered just long enough to sting. The recruit stood tall in formation, bruise-free, consequence-free, emboldened by the absence of immediate punishment. His friends laughed louder now. Their confidence fed on delay. Anna noticed everything. She noticed the way instructors avoided her eyes, the way her authority was quietly tested, the way silence was reinterpreted as concession. It was a familiar pattern. She had seen it before, in different uniforms, different rooms, different countries. She did not interrupt it. Instead, she taught. Her voice remained calm as she explained signal propagation, atmospheric distortion, unseen threats. The irony did not escape her. The room listened, but not closely. The recruit whispered something crude. Laughter rippled. She paused, letting the quiet stretch until discomfort replaced amusement. Then she continued. Later, the complaint arrived. Typed formal false. She read it once, then again, not to confirm the lies but to note their construction, exaggeration, projection, reversal of roles. A textbook attempt to muddy clean data. She returned the document without comment. "The evidence will suffice," she said. Some people mistook that for arrogance. It was. It was faith. The exercise was scheduled for the end of the week. Close quarters, confined spaces, controlled chaos. The kind of environment where size stopped mattering and awareness became currency. The recruit smiled when he saw her name on the roster. He thought this was his moment. He was wrong. The breach was loud, predictable, aggressive, exactly how he liked it. He charged forward, confidence high, weapon raised, already imagining the retelling. He never saw her move. Anna didn't meet force with force. She stepped aside, redirected, a hand on an elbow, a pivot. Momentum betrayed him. Gravity did the rest. He hit the floor hard enough to steal his breath. Before his second thought formed, his teammate folded beside him, air driven from lungs by their own weapon. Another lost balance. Another mistake. 8 seconds. That was all it took. No rage, no flourish, no retaliation. Just correction. In the control room, instructors replayed the footage in silence. Slow motion revealed what speed had hidden: efficiency, economy, absence of malice. She hadn't punished them, she solved them. And for the first time, the room saw her clearly. What does respect look like when it finally arrives? It doesn't shout. It stands up. The auditorium was full, ranks tight, breath held. The captain spoke without theatrics, voice carrying weight because it didn't need volume. Footage played, truth unfolded frame by frame. No interpretation required. The recruit was dismissed. Quietly, permanently. When the salutes came, unexpected, unanimous, Anna felt something loosen in her chest. Not triumph, not pride, something gentler, recognition. The system correcting itself. Later by the pool, she watched new recruits train. Focused, attentive, changed. A junior officer asked if it had all been worth it. She considered the question. Correction was achieved, she said. And that was true. Because dignity hadn't shouted. It hadn't struck back. It hadn't demanded revenge. It had waited. And then it acted. Sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. It simply removes the illusion that power was ever allowed to begin with. Why did she refuse to defend herself when everyone expected her to explode? By the next morning, the bruise had settled into her face like a quiet accusation. Purple at the center, fading to yellow at the edges, it followed the line of her cheekbone with clinical precision. Anna noticed it only because the mirror made it unavoidable. She studied it the way she studied everything else, without emotion, without story. Tissue damage, minor swelling, expected healing time, days, not weeks. What surprised her was not the mark itself, but how quickly it had become a symbol. In the corridors, conversations lowered as she passed. Some eyes flicked toward her cheek and then away, embarrassed by their own curiosity. Others lingered too long, measuring her against whatever version of strength they had grown up believing in. A few faces carried something closer to disappointment, as if they had hoped she would have fought back, as if restraint were somehow a failure. Anna walked through it all with the same steady pace she always kept. She did not adjust her posture to hide the bruise. She did not exaggerate it either. It existed. That was enough. In formation, she saw him immediately. Miller stood tall in the second row, shoulders squared, chin lifted just enough to project confidence. The bruise was not on his face. It was on hers. And in a place like this, appearances mattered more than truth, at least at first. He caught her looking. The corner of his mouth curled upward just slightly. Not a grin, a confirmation. He believed he had won something, not because he had struck her, but because nothing immediate had happened afterward. No public reckoning, no dramatic removal, no visible cost. Delay to men like him felt like immunity. Anna felt something then, not anger, not fear, a recalibration, a quiet internal note adjusting probability. So this is how it's going to move, she thought. She returned her gaze forward and dismissed him from her mind. The classroom smelled faintly of cleaning solvent and old carpet. Anna stood at the front, tablet in hand, explaining the principles of signal distortion in urban terrain. Her voice was calm, unhurried, almost gentle. She spoke as if every person in the room wanted to understand, as if they deserved that assumption. Most of them listened. Some did not. Miller leaned toward the recruit beside him and whispered something crude. It wasn't even clever. It didn't need to be. The laughter that followed was soft but deliberate, meant to be heard without being obvious. A test. Anna paused. She didn't look at him. She didn't acknowledge the sound. She simply stopped speaking. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, maybe more, long enough for discomfort to spread, long enough for the laughter to die without being confronted. When she resumed, her voice was unchanged. The most dangerous threats, she continued, are often the ones that don't announce themselves. A few recruits shifted in their seats. Miller's smile faded. That afternoon, the complaint was filed. 2 pages, sworn statements, carefully typed lies. According to the document, Anna had been the aggressor, verbally abusive, physically threatening. The punch had been reframed as self-defense. Her silence had been twisted into provocation. When the company chief handed her the papers, he avoided her eyes. "You have 48 hours to submit a rebuttal," he said. Anna read the document once, slowly, not because she needed time to understand it, but because she wanted to understand the people who wrote it, the phrasing, the exaggeration, the confidence with which fiction had been presented as fact. She handed it back. "My original report is complete," she said. "The evidence will resolve the discrepancy." The chief frowned. "You're not concerned?" Anna met his gaze evenly. "No." She left him standing there, unsettled by a certainty he could not share. That night, alone again, she sat at her small workbench and calibrated a receiver module slated for next week's training. Her hands moved with familiar precision. Adjust, test, record, repeat. Outside her window, the bass settled into its nocturnal rhythm. Distant footsteps, a door closing. Laughter carried on the wind and faded. Her cheek pulsed faintly. She acknowledged it the way she acknowledged static, present but irrelevant. What weighed on her was not the assault. It was the system's hesitation, the gap between incident and consequence. That gap was where narratives grew, where lies found oxygen. She trusted systems because they worked eventually, but eventually had a cost. She wondered briefly how many others had stood in that gap before her, how many had been reshaped by it, how many had learned to shout instead of wait. Anna chose waiting. The House of Pain loomed at the edge of the compound, a blunt concrete structure that swallowed sound and returned it altered. Inside, walls moved, angles lied, every mistake echoed. She pulled on the padded training gear with methodical care, adjusting straps, checking seals. When the helmet settled over her head, the world narrowed. Sound softened. Vision tunneled. Her breathing slowed. Master Chief Torres watched her from across the staging area. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "I am fit for duty," she replied. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. "Stick to the script." "I always do." Inside the structure, Anna took her position and waited. Waiting was not passive for her. It was active, listening, anticipating, calculating. She tracked the entry team's progress by sound alone, the cadence of boots, the muffled calls, the sharp cracks of training rounds. She could picture their movement without seeing it, predict where confidence would turn into carelessness. When the door burst open, Miller was first through. He moved fast, aggressive, exactly as expected. His momentum carried him forward, weapon raised, eyes locked on dominance rather than detail. He did not see her until it was too late. Anna stepped aside. She did not strike him. She did not need to. She redirected him. A hand on his elbow, a shift of weight. Physics did the rest. His own mass betrayed him, and the floor rose up to meet him with unforgiving honesty. The second recruit fell just as quickly. The third froze, confusion paralyzing him long enough for her to close the distance. 8 seconds. When it was over, the room was quiet again. Not the heavy silence of the dining hall. This one was different. This one was full of understanding. Miller looked up at her from the floor, rage and humiliation warring in his eyes. "What was that?" he demanded. Anna aligned the dropped weapons neatly on a nearby table. Order restored. "That," she said calmly, "was correction." She walked out without looking back. In the control room, instructors replayed the footage again and again, slowed it down, analyzed angles, counted movements. No wasted motion, no excess force, no emotion. Just efficiency. By evening, the narrative had shifted. Whispers replaced laughter. Respect crept in where mockery had lived. The complaint that once felt dangerous now felt fragile. Anna knew better than to assume it was over. Systems, after all, moved slowly. But they moved. And this time, the data was undeniable. Why did the truth feel heavier once everyone finally saw it? The shift didn't announce itself. It never did. It crept in quietly, the way pressure changes before a storm. Anna sensed it before she could name it, in the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, not out of mockery now, but caution. In the way instructors paused before speaking over her, then chose not to. In the way Miller no longer met her eyes, his confidence leaking away like air from a punctured seal. Respect she had learned long ago rarely arrived clean. It carried guilt with it, and fear. The after-action review room was dim, lit mostly by the glow of screens frozen on paused footage. Recruits sat stiff-backed in their chairs, hands folded, eyes forward. The house of pain replayed itself in fragments, angles, pivots, moments stretched thin and examined until excuses evaporated. Anna stood at the back of the room. She hadn't been asked to speak, she didn't expect to be. Her role officially was complete. She had participated as scripted. She had demonstrated a technique, nothing more. On the screen, Miller's fall repeated in slow motion. The instructor paused the footage, rewound it a few seconds, and played it again. "Right there," he said, pointing. "She doesn't block the weapon. Why?" No one answered. "Because blocking force with force is inefficient," another instructor said quietly. "She lets momentum finish the job." Anna watched the recruits' shoulders tense. For some, the lesson was technical. For others, it was existential. Miller sat rigid in his seat, jaw clenched, face flushed. Every replay stripped another layer from the story he'd told himself. That size guaranteed dominance, that aggression was strength, that silence was submission. Anna did not look at him. She never did. Later that afternoon, she was called into the commanding officer's office. Captain Evans was a quiet man, the kind whose authority settled into a room before he spoke. His office was sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, framed photos turned inward, their details private. He gestured for her to sit. She remained standing. "Chief," he said, studying her for a moment. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a muted yellow, but it was still visible. "I've reviewed the footage, all of it." "Yes, sir." "And the complaint?" "Yes, sir." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, measured. "You could have defended yourself in the dining facility," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "Why didn't you?" The question wasn't accusatory, it was curious. Anna considered it carefully, not because the answer was difficult but because it was precise. "Because retaliation would have obscured the sequence of events," she said. "It would have introduced ambiguity." Captain Evans leaned back slightly. "Ambiguity can be convenient." "Yes, sir." "And you chose not to use it." "I chose clarity." He nodded once. You trusted the system. I trusted the evidence, she corrected gently. Another pause. Miller filed a false official statement, Evans said. That's not nothing. No, sir. It could have complicated things. It attempted to. Evans almost smiled. Almost. You're aware that not everyone would have handled it the way you did. Yes, sir. And that some would call your restraint risky. Anna met his gaze evenly. Risk is inherent in all systems, sir. The question is whether the risk improves the outcome. Evans studied her for a long moment, and did it. Anna thought of the House of Pain, the footage, the recruits watching the truth unfold frame by frame, the quiet recalibration she felt rippling through the command. Yes, sir, she said, it did. That evening, the decision was made. Anna did not know it yet. She returned to the dive tank, the place where sound softened and pressure clarified everything. The water reflected harsh fluorescent light in broken patterns across the ceiling. Recruits moved through drills with renewed focus, their attention sharper than it had been days before. She noticed the difference. They listened now, not because they feared her but because they trusted her competence. Trust was harder to earn, harder to maintain. A junior officer stood beside her, watching the trainees surface in controlled sequence. You changed something, he said quietly. Anna didn't look at him. Systems change when errors are identified. He hesitated. Most people would have taken that punch personally. Anna considered the rippling water. Most people confuse dignity with response, she said. They are not the same. He nodded slowly, unsure if he understood, but aware that he had witnessed something uncommon. The next morning, the auditorium was filled. Full-dress uniforms, ranks aligned, 1,000 small sounds settling into silence as Captain Evans took the podium. Anna stood to the side, hands clasped behind her back, posture relaxed but formal. She had no idea what he would say. She only knew what she had done. Evans spoke about honor, about courage, about commitment, words worn thin by repetition but sharpened now by context. He spoke about accountability not as punishment but as necessity, about the danger of arrogance, the cost of dishonesty. Then he called Miller forward. Anna did not look at him as he walked the long aisle. She didn't need to. She could feel the weight of the moment settle across the room like gravity shifting. The footage played. First the dining hall, the shove, the punch, the silence after. Then the House of Pain. 8 seconds. When the screens went dark, no one breathed. Evans' voice was calm when he spoke again. Seaman Recruit Miller, you are hereby disenrolled from this program. The words landed clean. No flourish, no anger, just finality. Miller's shoulders sagged, not in defeat alone but in revelation. The system he had tried to manipulate had finally closed around him, not violently but completely. As he was escorted out, Anna felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Relief. The pressure eased, the equation balanced. Evans turned back to the room. Competence, he said, is not loud, integrity is not flashy, but they endure. Then he turned to her. Chief Petty Officer Anna Sharma, he said, your conduct has been exemplary. She felt every eye in the room settle on her. Evans raised his hand in a formal salute. For the first time since the punch, Anna felt her composure shift, just slightly. A crack quickly sealed. She returned the salute with precision, heart steady but full. Around them instructors stood, one by one, salutes followed. Not to rank, to principle. Later, alone again by the water, Anna watched recruits train with a new kind of seriousness. The system was quieter now, cleaner, more honest. The junior officer approached again. Do you ever regret not hitting back? He asked softly. Anna watched a trainee complete a drill flawlessly, then surface with controlled calm. No, she said, because the goal was never to win a moment. She turned her attention back to the pool. It was to correct the course. What happens after justice is served, but the echo of it hasn't faded yet. The auditorium emptied slowly as if people were reluctant to return to the normal rhythm of the bass. Conversation stayed muted, steps softened. Something fundamental had shifted and no one quite trusted the old volume anymore. Anna felt it as she walked through the corridor afterward, not eyes avoiding her now, but eyes following her with a different weight. Not curiosity, not doubt, consideration. She didn't linger. She never did. That evening she returned to her quarters earlier than usual. The room greeted her with its familiar order. Uniforms aligned, books squared, tools laid out exactly where she'd left them. The quiet pressed in gently, not oppressive but contemplative. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to sit without an objective, without a checklist, without a problem immediately demanding resolution. That was when the fatigue arrived. Not physical, not the ache in her cheek, now almost gone. It was deeper than that. A tiredness born from holding restraint in place while the world tried to pry it loose. From trusting a system that required patience when instinct screamed for speed. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. For a moment, just one, she wondered what would have happened if the system hadn't worked, if the footage had been unclear, if the command had chosen convenience over correction, if silence had swallowed truth the way it sometimes did. It wasn't bitterness she felt. It was awareness. She understood more clearly than ever that restraint carried risk. Quiet strength was not safer than loud resistance. It was simply different, and often lonelier. The next morning, training resumed. Schedules did not pause for moral reckonings. Recruits lined up before dawn, breath fogging in the cool air, bodies moving on habit. Anna took her place on the deck beside the instructors, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning posture, spacing, attention. The change was immediate. Commands were followed faster. Jokes died in throats before they reached daylight. When she spoke, heads turned without hesitation. Not because she demanded attention, but because no one wanted to miss something she might say. Respect, she noted, altered behavior before it altered language. Miller's absence was a hollow shape in the formation. No one filled it. No one tried. During a break, a young recruit approached her hesitantly. His voice shook just enough to betray nerves. "Chief," he said, "may I ask you something?" She nodded once. "How did you stay calm after?" Anna studied him for a moment. He wasn't looking for technique. He was looking for permission, to be something other than what he'd been told strength looked like. "Calm is not the absence of reaction," she said. "It is the decision to choose which reaction serves the outcome." He absorbed that quietly, nodded, and stepped away. Later that day, Captain Evans requested her presence again. This time, his office door was open. Sunlight cut across the floor in clean lines. He gestured for her to sit, and this time she did. "I won't keep you long," he said. "I wanted to close the loop." "Yes, sir." "The incident exposed more than one failure," Evans continued. "Not just in Miller." Anna waited. There were instructors who hesitated, leaders who deferred, a culture that allowed silence to feel safer than intervention. He exhaled slowly. "That's on me." She met his gaze. "Systems reflect their tolerances, sir." He nodded. "Exactly, and tolerances need recalibration." He slid a folder across the desk. "I want you to take a more active role in training design, not just technical instruction, culture." Anna opened the folder. The proposal was concise, intentional, measured. "You want me to teach restraint," she said. "I want you to teach judgment," Evans corrected. "The kind that keeps people alive." She closed the folder. "I accept, sir." As she stood to leave, Evans added quietly, "You know this will make you more visible." "Yes, sir." And visibility attracts friction. Yes, sir. He studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. Good. The first session she led was not physical. No drills, no gear, just a room, chairs in a circle, and silence thick enough to make people fidget. Recruits shifted uncomfortably, unsure what was expected. Anna stood, hands clasped loosely, and waited until the room settled. When you think of strength, she began, what do you picture? Answers came hesitantly at first: size, speed, endurance, aggression. She listened without interruption. Then she asked, what do you picture when you think of survival? The room changed. Someone said awareness, someone else said patience, another said trust. Anna nodded. Strength is a tool, she said. Survival is a system. She didn't lecture, she asked questions. Let them collide with their own assumptions. Let silence do some of the work. Afterward, one of the senior instructors approached her, a man who had spent decades relying on volume and presence. You made them uncomfortable, he said. Yes, she replied. He hesitated, then added, it was effective. That night, Anna returned to the dive tank alone. The water was still, reflecting her face back at her in broken fragments. She knelt at the edge and watched the ripples settle after her hand disturbed the surface. She thought about Miller, not with anger but with clarity. He had been a variable the system failed to filter early. His removal was not vengeance, it was maintenance. She also thought about herself, about the cost of always choosing restraint, of absorbing impact, physical and otherwise, without visible reaction. She wondered briefly how much could be absorbed before something fractured. Then she remembered the recruits that morning, the way they stood straighter, the way they listened. The system was stronger now. And so was she. In the weeks that followed, the base grew quieter, not less intense, more focused. Discipline tightened not through fear but through expectation. People intervened sooner, spoke up faster. The gap between incident and correction narrowed. One evening, as Anna walked back to her quarters, the junior officer fell into step beside her again. Do you ever think about leaving? He asked. She considered the question carefully. No, she said, because work remains. He smiled faintly. You make it look easy. Anna stopped walking and looked at him. It is not, she said honestly, but it is necessary. She resumed her stride, leaving him standing there thoughtful. Later, alone, she removed the last trace of the bruise from her memory, not by forgetting it but by contextualizing it. It was no longer an injury. It was data, a marker, a reminder. Correction had been achieved, but maintenance was ongoing. And she would remain. Not loud, not flashy, but precise. What does it cost to remain steady when the world finally leans on you instead of against you? The new rhythm settled in slowly, like a tide finding its mark. Anna felt it in the smallest moments, a pause before a joke that once would have landed without consequence, a hand raised sooner during a briefing, not to challenge authority but to clarify it. People were listening differently now, not just to her but to each other. Change rarely announced itself with celebration. It arrived disguised as habit. Anna's days filled quickly: training design meetings, after-action reviews, quiet conversations that lingered longer than they used to. She spoke less than many expected. When she did speak, people wrote things down. She noticed something else too. The restraint she had carried alone was no longer hers to bear by herself. One afternoon, during a particularly demanding field evolution, a recruit stumbled. Not physically, mentally. His breathing went shallow. His hands shook just enough to compromise his grip. Old instincts rippled through the group. Someone laughed nervously. Another rolled his eyes. Before Anna could intervene, a fellow recruit stepped forward. Hey, he said quietly, grounding his voice the way he'd been taught. Slow it down, you're here. We've got you. The moment passed, the recruit recovered, The exercise continued. Anna said nothing. Later she made a note. That night exhaustion crept in the way it always did, silently, persistently. She sat at her desk long after the bass quieted, reviewing footage, annotating timing discrepancies, refining language. Precision mattered, not because perfection was possible but because clarity reduced harm. Her reflection in the darkened window looked older than she remembered. Not worn, just layered, experience stacked neatly like sediment. She touched her cheek unconsciously. The bruise was gone, but its absence felt strange. She hadn't realized how much of herself had been oriented around it, around holding still while the world decided what it meant. Now that it was gone, there was space. Space invited questions. What happens when the impact fades, but the memory remains? Anna closed the file she was working on and leaned back. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to think beyond procedure, beyond outcomes, beyond systems. She thought about her first posting, about the early lessons learned the hard way, about how often silence had been safer than speaking, and how often it had cost more than it saved. She thought about the narrow line between discipline and erasure. She wondered, not for the first time, how many versions of herself she had edited down over the years to fit operational needs. The thought unsettled her. The next day she was asked to speak to a smaller group, not recruits, instructors. They sat in a loose semicircle, coffee cups in hand, postures casual but attentive. These were seasoned professionals, people who had built their identities on decisiveness and control, people who did not enjoy uncertainty. Anna stood before them and felt the familiar urge to minimize herself, to keep it technical, safe. She resisted it. When we talk about resilience, she began, we often frame it as endurance, as the ability to withstand pressure without change. A few heads nodded. But resilience, she continued, is also adaptive. It is the capacity to absorb impact and still recalibrate. She paused, letting the words settle. If a system survives but does not adjust, it remains vulnerable. One of the instructors shifted. Are you saying we failed? Anna met his gaze evenly. I'm saying the system revealed a weakness, and then it corrected. Another instructor crossed his arms. You make it sound clean. It wasn't, Anna replied. But clarity often arrives after discomfort, not instead of it. Silence followed, not defensive, reflective. When the session ended, no one rushed out. Later, Master Chief Torres found her near the equipment lockers. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, expression unreadable. You know, he said slowly, I've been doing this a long time. Yes, Anna said. I've seen people break systems by pushing too hard, he continued, and I've seen people disappear by staying too quiet. He looked at her then, really looked. You didn't do either. Anna considered that. I chose timing. Torres huffed a quiet laugh. Damn right you did. That evening, Anna went to the dive tank again. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to. The water was calm, reflecting the overhead lights like a broken constellation. She stripped down to training gear and entered slowly, letting the water rise around her. The pressure wrapped her in familiar silence. Here, everything simplified. Breath, balance, buoyancy. Underwater, sound disappeared. Ego dissolved. Only physics remained. She swam a slow circuit, movements economical, mind drifting into a rare state of quiet. In that space, something surfaced, not a memory but a realization. She had spent years mastering restraint. But restraint was not the same as suppression. The difference mattered. When she surfaced, the air felt sharp in her lungs. She pulled herself out and sat on the edge, water dripping from her sleeves. For the first time since the incident, she allowed herself to feel something she had postponed. Grief. Not for the punch, not even for the injustice. for the version of herself that had learned too early that invisibility was safety. She sat with that feeling, didn't rush it, didn't analyze it away. Then she let it go. The following week brought an unexpected request. A new transfer, female, quiet, highly capable, struggling. She reminds people of you, the lieutenant said carefully, and that's causing friction. Anna nodded, set a time. The meeting was brief. The young officer sat stiffly, hands folded, eyes alert. She spoke quickly, defensively, as if preemptively justifying her existence. Anna listened. When the officer finished, Anna said only one thing. You don't need to become louder, you need to become clearer. The officer blinked. How? Anna considered the question. By choosing when silence serves you and when it doesn't. The officer nodded slowly, something easing in her shoulders. As she left, Anna felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride but continuity, a line extending forward. That night, as Anna updated training metrics, she realized something else had shifted. She was no longer waiting for the system to respond to her. She was shaping it. Responsibility settled in her chest with familiar weight, not oppressive, purposeful. The next time she passed the dining facility, she paused briefly at the entrance. The hum of voices spilled out. Laughter, conversation, normalcy. She stepped inside. No one stared. No one whispered. She collected her tray and sat where she always had, near the wall, with a clear view of exits and entrances. Old habits endured. As she ate, she noticed a small thing. At a nearby table, a recruit corrected another's behavior quietly. No posturing, no escalation, just adjustment. Anna took a sip of water. Correction was no longer exceptional. It was becoming routine. And that, she knew, was the true measure of success. Because strength that must announce itself fades quickly. But strength that recalibrates systems endures. What remains when the moment has passed, but the lesson refuses to leave. The base settled into its quiet season, not quieter in sound but in friction. Movements were sharper now, conversations cleaner. Problems surfaced earlier before they could harden into crises. Anna noticed it the way one notices a change in weather, not dramatic but unmistakable. The system breathed easier. She walked the perimeter one evening as the sun dipped low, the sky bleeding from orange into blue. Training was done for the day. The air carried salt and metal and something softer beneath it, relief maybe, or resolve. She thought about how close everything had come to drifting the other way. If the camera had failed, if the report had been delayed, if someone higher up had decided it was easier to smooth things over than to correct them. The distance between order and decay was narrower than most people believed. Anna had lived her career inside that narrow space. She stopped near the edge of the compound where the noise thinned and the horizon opened. For a moment, she allowed herself to stand without scanning for exits, without calculating angles, just standing, present. It felt unfamiliar. That night she received a message marked routine but sent personally. Captain Evans requested a brief meeting, not in his office, on the deck overlooking the water. When she arrived, he was already there, hands resting on the railing, eyes on the dark surface below. No uniform jacket, no ceremony. "Chief," he said. "Captain." They stood in silence for a while. The water moved slowly beneath them, indifferent to rank, to conflict, to resolution. "I wanted you to know," Evans said finally, "we're incorporating your framework into the next training cycle, not just here, broader." Anna absorbed that. "I appreciate the confidence, sir." "It's earned," he replied. Then, after a pause, "You understand this puts you on a different trajectory." "Yes, sir." "More responsibility, less anonymity." She nodded. Anonymity was never the objective. Evans turned slightly, studying her profile. You could have forced the issue early, made noise, demanded action. Yes, sir. But you didn't. No, sir. Do you ever question that choice? Anna considered the water again, the way it reflected broken light without holding it. Sometimes, she said honestly, but questioning is not regret. Evan smiled faintly. That's a rare distinction. When he left, Anna remained, alone with the sound of water and the weight of what had followed restraint, not erasure but influence. The next morning brought an unexpected sight. Miller's former spot in formation had been filled but not replaced. No one tried to claim it. The space had simply closed, seamless, efficient. Training began, commands echoed, bodies moved, sweat fell, the work continued. During a break, Anna noticed the young officer she'd spoken to earlier, quiet, capable, once struggling, now leading a small group through a drill. Her voice was calm, clear, not loud. It worked. Anna felt something warm settle behind her ribs, not pride, recognition, continuity. Later in the classroom, a recruit asked a question that lingered longer than most. "Chief," he said, hesitant but sincere, "how do you know when to act and when to wait?" The room stilled. Anna did not answer immediately. She rarely did. "You act," she said finally, "when waiting would distort the truth, and you wait when acting would." The recruit nodded slowly, not fully understanding, but feeling the shape of it. That was enough. Weeks passed, then months. The incident faded into institutional memory, distilled into lessons rather than gossip. New recruits arrived unaware of what had happened, only sensing the environment they'd entered, one less tolerant of posturing, more demanding of integrity. Anna preferred it that way. She continued her work, teaching, designing, observing, correcting. She did not soften, she did not harden, she refined. One evening, long after the base had gone quiet, she returned to her quarters and stood before the mirror. The bruise was long gone. No mark remained. She leaned closer, studying her reflection, not for damage but for truth. She saw fatigue there, and resolve, lines earned not given. She also saw something else. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the absence of unresolved conflict. She turned away from the mirror and powered down the lights. The room settled around her, familiar and ordered. As she lay awake, she thought, not for the first time, about that moment in the dining hall. The fist, the silence, the decision not to strike back. She understood now what that moment had really been. Not weakness, not patience, choice. The choice to let truth arrive intact, unpolluted by impulse. The choice to trust process without surrendering agency. The choice to absorb impact without becoming it. In the end, no one remembered the punch. They remembered what followed. The correction, the recalibration, the quiet strength that refused to announce itself, and therefore endured. Anna closed her eyes as the base breathed around her. Tomorrow would bring new variables, new friction, new tests. She would meet them the same way she always had. Not loudly, not violently, not in haste, but with clarity. Because dignity does not shout. It does not rush. It does not beg to be seen. Sometimes dignity waits. And then, when the moment is right, it acts.